Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Things I Want My Daughters to Know podcast. And today we are going to get deep into a conversation that I love, all my favorite topics: hormones, women's health related to hormonal imbalance, healthcare, the way that our healthcare system supports, or more correctly, often doesn't support women's health. We're going to get into all of it today with our guest, Stephanie. Stephanie, welcome to the podcast. Introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and then we'll get into our conversation.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Stephanie Singh. I am a certified menstrual health coach. I'm a holistic nutritionist, and I have been in the position where I have felt marginalized, dismissed, gaslit by the medical system, finding myself in a position where I was searching for answers and not getting anywhere,
Yeah,
and ultimately just feeling like I was at war with my body, I was at war with my hormones, and I was
yeah,
just I was so frustrated and I was so exhausted, and I knew that that was not the way that I was meant to live my
yeah,
life. And for me, it kind of took a quarter life crisis, like a health crisis. Really, it was beyond my hormones, and really recognizing that my passion lay in understanding women's physiology and health and hormones,
yeah,
and understanding the deeper whys behind all of the things that we experience as women throughout our
yeah.
monthly cycle. And now I help women who are experiencing all kinds of hormonal chaos the way that I was, and not to feel like they're
Yeah.
living life around their cycle anymore.
Yeah, amazing. So we've got so much to talk about here. One of the things I just want to start off by saying is that, just to clarify, when you are referring to that hormonal chaos, you're not necessarily referring specifically to that typical traditional hormonal chaos time of perimenopause and menopause. I know you work with women across all ages at all stages of life cycle, and I think that that's maybe an important point, an important place to start, with the growth and expansion, and it really explosion of the menopause conversation, which is amazing. We
Yes.
think that hormonal chaos and or hormonal disruption or hormonal imbalance, whatever phrase you'd like to use, only happens at perimenopause and menopause.
Right.
So maybe let's take it a step back and tell us a little bit about why or when hormonal chaos, hormonal imbalance can happen at all other stages of a woman's life, not just this typical traditional perimenopause stage.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is really an interesting question, and I think one that requires a little bit of a almost a caveat, if you will. We have more than 50 hormones in our body. It's
Yeah,
not even just the sex hormones that we think about traditionally in, even perimenopause and menopause, like
yeah,
estrogen and progesterone. We make so many hormones,
yeah,
and they are all, it's like an orchestra. They're all so interconnected, and we can't really just isolate one. If we think about an orchestra, when one instrument goes out of tune, the entire song just
yeah,
feels off, right?
yeah,
So kind of similar to the body. So we can see these hormonal imbalances, even if we're just talking periods, we can see these imbalances happening through the entire life cycle of a woman from the time that she starts puberty. And really, I think, this is almost the opposite of perimenopause, right? And you've heard some practitioners and experts really talk about perimenopause as reverse puberty.
yeah,
When puberty is occurring, this is when our hormones, our sex hormones more specifically, are now starting to come onto the scene. And so we see a lot of these young girls, especially with all of the xenoestrogen exposure that we have these days,
yeah,
have really painful periods or heavy periods. Some have absent periods altogether. And at 16, they're being put on the pill to stimulate a period, and
yeah,
it can start really quite young. And then through our 20s, our 30s, our reproductive years, you know, we hear so puberty and perimenopause kind of being like two ends of the spectrum, and two of the biggest times for hormonal fluctuations. If you think about our reproductive years and postpartum depression and the hormonal fluctuations that can happen post pregnancy, it's huge. And
yeah,
so really we can start to see these shifts and changes occur throughout the reproductive life cycle,
Yeah.
throughout our teens, 20s, 30s, and beyond. It's really not isolated to one particular age group. And I think that's
Yeah.
really important because perimenopause is kind of getting like its moment in the spotlight, which I
Okay.
think is justified, but it's kind of leaving the rest of these age groups behind.
Yeah. So much to unpack, though. I think the first thing really is that because we are, as females, born with, anyone born with ovaries, uterus, we have these female hormones that sort of define us in our society, those female hormones, that reproductive cycle, that menstrual cycle. We don't realize, as you correctly said, and I think it's really important to state this, we don't talk about it enough. Even though we are females with these reproductive hormones, these hormones are part of this larger endocrine hormonal system. And these reproductive hormones don't just control reproduction, they have so many other profound impacts. And as you said, interact with other hormones in so many profound ways. And sometimes I think one of the myths that we really have to bust, and one of the narratives we really have to reframe, is that even though a a female with ovaries, uterus, with these female reproductive um, hormones, the picture is much larger. It is much more complicated. It is much more intricate. And the minute that these hormones, estrogen, progesterone, even testosterone, but I know that you
Yeah.
talk specifically about estrogen, and we'll talk about that. The minute they start to fluctuate at any stage of our lives, there are going to be profound knock-on effects. And I think that women's health really has siloed us into being only about reproduction and reproductive hormones without understanding the larger holistic picture of what's going on in our bodies.
Yes, absolutely. And so there's a couple of pieces there, right? Um, when you talk about this silo effect that sort of starts to happen, I think this is really this stems from the way that our healthcare system operates. You go to an endocrine specialist for
Yeah,
hormones, you go to a gastroenterologist for digestive issues, you
yeah,
go to a rheumatoid doctor for autoimmunity. And it's like they've separated the body
yeah,
into individual working parts, but
yeah,
there there isn't there isn't communication between
yeah,
those specialists to start piecing everything together and making it
yeah,
all make sense. And I think women get so lost in
yeah,
that system where nothing is connecting and it feels so overwhelming. And then, the other sort of side of this too is, when we're talking about all of the various pieces of, even just with hormones and all of the hormones and the systems that operate and work together, I think oftentimes women are so quick, and this isn't a slam on women. I think this is very much like messaging that we've heard over the years. If you even think about common phrases that we'll use, oh, it must be that time of the month. Oh, she's so hormonal.
yes,
No,
yes,
it's like we blame our hormones. We are so quick to blame our sex hormones, and that's all it becomes. But our hormones, our sex hormones, are just chemical messengers.
yeah,
They're just delivering a message. They're trying to
yeah,
get our attention. It's like a text message from our
yes,
body trying to tell us something, right? And we're just, slapping on supplements or birth control pills or medications or whatever, what have you,
yeah,
to sort of silence these hormonal messages without really understanding and unpacking what
yeah.
they're communicating to us or taking into consideration what else is happening in the body that is, sending these messages and these signals to us via the hormones.
But I think one of the reasons why that has happened is because of the way the medical healthcare system relates to women's health, and the way that the medical healthcare system, until very recently, was really not understanding women's health and women's health conditions in
Absolutely.
any thoughtful, informed way. And again, we are not here to bash the medical healthcare system. doctors are heroes, and the medical healthcare system was created and designed to do very clear, specific things, and it does that
Yes.
very, very well.
Yes.
However, we have to at least acknowledge that when it comes specifically to women's health, the medical healthcare system is profoundly lacking. It is
Yeah.
has not, our healthcare professionals have not been trained in a really nuanced, detailed, informed way about women's health. And I think
Yes.
that everything you've just said about the way that women ourselves understand our hormones, our symptoms, the treatment options available to us, we are reflecting back what the healthcare system has told us about our bodies, about our
Yeah.
reproductive cycles.
Absolutely. I agree. I think doctors genuinely they want to help and support. And
Yes.
they are doing the best that they can within a system in which they operate.
Yeah.
And it's the system really that is letting us down, not the
Yeah.
doctors, because like you said, they are very good and very specialized at, very specific things. And, I think with women's health, that is diagnosing and treating with prescriptions.
Yeah.
And, I really do believe there's a time and a place for all sorts of medical care. There really
Yeah.
is. I think, perhaps, although I struggle to create an argument for this, perhaps for hormonal birth control. But my concern is that over the last, several decades, as long as I've been doing this work, it is the go-to for
Yeah.
doctors to prescribe either the pill. I'm finding over the last couple of years, there's been a shift towards IUDs
Hmm.
more so than the pill now. Same.
Interesting.
It's still synthetic hormones,
Yeah.
just a different delivery format, really. But this is the problem that we're experiencing with women's health, especially
Yeah.
in the healthcare system, is that
Yeah.
is the tool that they have available. It's the
Yeah.
only tool
It's the
that
only
they have
tool.
available because they don't have, as you said, that nuanced knowledge and
Yeah.
understanding of that greater picture and all of the things that go into
Yeah.
that landscape when we're
Yeah.
looking at women's hormones.
Yeah. So we can absolutely go on a tangent talking about the pill and how the pill is being
Oh, yes.
prescribed for anything and everything to do with women's health, from,
Yes.
irregular periods to acne to, a whole host of different things. But I want to
Yep.
go back to your sort of area of expertise, which is estrogen dominance, and to really help us understand how this estrogen hormone, how this fluctuation in this hormone, and very often high levels of this hormone are showing up for women. Sort of what does that look like? And again, we're talking about, I mean, we talk about women at all ages and stages of their life
Yeah.
cycles. So share with us a little bit what that looks like, and then how we can think about this differently from a different perspective.
Absolutely. So, what I see classically as estrogen dominance, and I could get into the nitty-gritty and the clinical side of the different types of estrogen dominance, but let's keep it simple,
Yeah.
and just sort of think about, what does that experience look like for a woman? Oftentimes, and what I see most is the heavy periods. It's heavy
Right.
periods, it's painful periods, it could be longer periods. And I don't know. I mean, you let me know. Is it helpful to sort of talk about like what does a heavy period even mean? Because I find there's so many women walking around who are kind of like, well, this is normal for me.
This is not
So,
for me. Exactly. I think one of the challenges, and that's why I really do want you to go into how this is showing up for women, is
mm,
so many women are like, this is just my normal. They don't
yes,
realize that this is not normal
yeah,
objectively, and that they're
yeah,
actually something they should be investigating, because
yeah,
this is just their experience. And maybe even once they did go to their doctor and the doctor was like, this is just
yeah,
normal. So they just think
yeah,
this is just normal and this is just what it is.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah, yeah,
maybe sort of break it down a little bit so women can
yeah.
understand when what is within the, and obviously there is a range, what is
There
within
is.
range, and when do we need to start maybe paying more attention?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a couple of things that I'd like to think about. So there is, we can even talk about, how often are you changing a pad or a tampon or a cup, and what that translates to into a heavy period. So if you're
Mm.
using, a regular tampon or a regular pad over the course of all of the days that you bleed. So if you're bleeding for, 5 days, just as an example, and you're changing your tampon, a regular tampon or pad, about 8 times, that's normal. If it's anything more than about 16 tampons over the course of your bleed, that's too heavy.
You're talking
If
about over the
it's
course of the whole
over the
bleed.
course of a bleed, not per day,
Okay.
but over the course of a bleed. So, and to put that sort of into, time perspective. So if there's a couple of days, because I find most women, I find this even for myself, there's usually 1, 2 days that tend to be a little bit heavier
Heavier.
than the others.
Yeah.
And that could be different. For me, it tends to be day 1 and 2. For other women, it's day 2 and 3.
Yeah.
There isn't one that's right or wrong. There's, you just notice. I just find that tends to be the case. But on your heaviest days, if you are going to the bathroom to change a pad or a tampon, less than every 4 hours. So for me at one time, I was going at least every two. I had a tampon, I had a backup pad, and I was still going to the bathroom to change it
Wow.
every 2 hours for at least 2 or 3 days because it was so heavy. And I, at the time, didn't really think much of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is going back years now, but that's too heavy. And oftentimes what I hear isn't necessarily, oh, my period is so heavy, I'm losing so much blood. What I hear is, I'm exhausted. I'm iron deficient. I'm housebound because I have to make sure that I'm near a toilet.
Toilet.
I can't go on day trips with my family or friends. I have to have a period wardrobe of all black clothing because if I leak through,
Yeah.
I'm going to be leaving a mess. I can't go to, for 2 or 3 days, the first 2, 3 days of
Yeah.
my period, I cannot go anywhere because I will leave stains behind on chairs. And I'm just too damn exhausted to do anything about it. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of the conversation that I hear. Iron deficiency tends to be a part of this
Yeah.
picture too. That's a whole other conversation. But it becomes the really impactful on her quality of life
Yeah.
because it's zapping her of, her power in those days
Yeah.
and in the recovery time. And it becomes a bit of a cyclical period of dread.
Yeah.
It's like you live through it. It's an exhausting experience. You come out the other side, you're playing catch up and you're trying to like regenerate. And
Mm.
then it's the dread of, oh my God, it's going to start
Going to
again
start
soon.
again.
And the PMS kicks in. And it's just it's
Yeah.
this cycle. So
Yeah.
heavy periods, I find, tend to be predominant in the women that I work with anyway. Painful periods are part of that. Fibroids, which
Yeah.
I tend to see more often in women who are 35 and over, they tend to be like really
Yeah.
predominant in
Well,
perimenopause because
we know that,
of
yeah,
that.
we know that
Yeah.
when a woman in her 40s or, anywhere in her 40s, um,
Yeah.
saying that she's being treated for fibroids, and the doctor's like, well, it's so common for women of your age. It is actually one of those classic signs that you are estrogen dominant
Yes.
in perimenopause, menopause. Um,
Yes.
and therefore, it's not just you've got fibroids, let's just remove them. It's you've got fibroids, you're probably estrogen dominant. Let's start looking at what's going on here
Yeah.
if you're estrogen dominant throughout perimenopause and menopause. So yeah,
Yes.
fibroids is a very
Huge.
classic way of like it's a real telltale sign that
Yes.
something is going on here. But
Yes.
it's
Very
treated just
much.
like another women's health reproductive issue.
Yeah. Take the pill or just have a myomectomy. And and we don't need to go off on tangent and talk about fibroids, but one thing that I do want to say, because this is so common, is
Yeah,
doctors will say, well, surgery is birth control or surgery.
yeah,
Myomectomy typically to have the fibroid removed. But here's the thing, if you are not also understanding what caused the fibroid to grow, you're going to have fibroids grow back after
Yep.
surgery. And I see
Yep.
this so often in women who
Yep.
haven't been given that education and information.
Yep.
So it ends up being this frustration, like, oh, finally I had surgery and it made it all better. And then a year or two go by and it's like, what's happening? Why is it
Yep.
back?
Yep.
So fibroids huge. Endometriosis and adenomyosis also, although not specifically just hormonal conditions, they are autoimmune in nature. They are full body endocrine and inflammatory conditions, but
Yep.
there is a hormonal component to them
Component
also.
to it. And other things like PCOS, again,
Yeah.
PCOS, like endometriosis, is a much larger
Yes.
endocrine situation. We know that PCOS is now much more connected with things like insulin resistance,
Yes.
inflammation. It's not just about estrogen and or
Right.
testosterone. But we do need to understand that they are connected, that is at
Yes,
least
absolutely.
one avenue to explore. Um, Anything else that women need to sort of like, that women listening are like, oh my goodness, maybe there is a really strong hormonal piece here that I need to be checking out. We've talked about heavy periods,
Yeah.
PMS, fibroids. When you say fibroids, are we also including cysts and any type of
Yes.
irregular
Yeah,
growth on the
absolutely. This
ovaries?
polyps, they tend to
Yeah,
have
polyps. Yeah,
similar pathology.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Endometriosis, PCOS, and I guess any what doctors love to call unexplained fertility issues.
Yeah, fertility is a big one. And
Yeah,
other things too, and something that I will hear women describe to me is this feeling that they are living in autopilot survival mode.
yeah,
That it's just this level of exhaustion, and they're just at the point now where they're just trying to get through. They're pushing
yeah,
through, and they're just trying to get through life. And it's not about it's about survival. It's not
yeah,
about thriving. It's not about feeling and living your best life. It's just how do I get through this,
yeah.
which is really sad. And
Very
you
sad.
know, sleep can get roped into this as well. I think especially in perimenopause, sleep can be, I know for me, when I got into, I'm 43 now, so I'm in the throes of perimenopause myself, and sleep for me is like the first thing that
Yeah,
reared its ugly head that I started
yeah,
having difficulty with. And when you're not sleeping, that has a cascading
yeah.
effect on everything,
Everything. Yeah,
everything.
yeah,
So it shows up in so many different
yeah.
ways for women.
Okay, we've laid out the doom and gloom. We've laid out the way that this can manifest for women. We've laid out the fact that very often these women are not getting sufficient answers, let's put it like that, from their
Yes.
healthcare professionals. So they come to you. What are you, what sort of, where are you starting with them? And I guess what hope or what guidance are you giving them for, a journey of recovery and really taking back their health story? Because I think that that is really one of the strong pieces here, is that they learn to take ownership over their own health experience rather than, for want of a better word, surrendering it to the doctor that they're not really getting any answers from anyway.
Yes. Oh, this is so huge. And this is what I say all of the time. It is really learning how to interpret what your body is saying
Yeah,
to you and really taking that ownership and responsibility back, because we have been taught. And listen, I grew up in a medical household. Both of my grandfathers were doctors. Both of my grandmothers were nurses. My mom was a nurse. One of her
wow.
sisters was a nurse. Her doctor, or her brother rather, was a nurse. So that was what I grew up in. It was, you have a headache, oh, take a Tylenol. You do what the doctor says to do because they know best.
Yeah,
Um, and that's, I think, what my generation kind of grew up in.
yeah,
And I think we're now starting to see this emergence of, again, my generation of women being very frustrated with what we're getting from the medical system and
yeah,
not wanting that for our daughters, because we aren't being empowered. We aren't being given answers, which takes the control away.
yeah.
And what I really like to do is to teach women how to take that control back for themselves. And what that doesn't mean is me telling them what to do.
Okay.
I can walk them through and I can give them all of the steps and all of the protocols. There are really four critical pillars I mean, a fifth if you want to throw it in there, but nutrition is so essential.
Yeah.
Gut health is critical. Supporting your liver and detoxification pathways,
Yeah.
absolutely necessary for estrogen, especially. And then the nervous system. And then the fifth one I might throw in there is movement. Um, physical movement.
Yeah.
But what I really like to teach and work with my clients on is where are you at in your season of life right now? And what is doable for you? And where do you see opportunities to capture your low-hanging fruit? Because it's
Yeah.
one thing for me to say, I'm going to put together this 5-point protocol for you, and you're going to do X, Y, Z, W.
Yeah.
And you're going to look at that and go, great, okay, see you
Yeah.
next month.
Yeah, you're
And
gonna
you
put it
walk
on the
away,
pinboard. You're gonna put it on the pinboard,
right?
and you're gonna, and then the shame, guilt,
Yeah.
embarrassment when you're not following that protocol that they paid for and that you gave
Yeah.
them, and yeah, and that only adds
Yeah.
to the spiral
And
of
it just adds to the frustration. And then
yeah,
it becomes one more thing that you tried that didn't work. One
yeah,
more practitioner who let you
yeah,
down. It isn't the practitioner that's letting you down, it's the process and it's the system.
yeah,
So I really like to teach how women can take over that responsibility for themselves because at the end of the day, like I said, I can create that blueprint, I can create a beautiful plan and protocol, but I cannot come to your house
yeah,
and make you do it.
yeah, yeah,
And monitor and
yeah,
watch and like time and all of the things, you know what I mean?
yeah,
So it's creating that partnership
yeah,
and creating an opportunity for her to really start to look at her body and identify where the biggest opportunities are for her and then
yeah,
honing in on those areas.
yeah. So important. Yeah, without that personalization, it's never going to work.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about one of your steps in your protocol because I
Yeah.
think it's the thing that is really ignored when it comes to hormonal health and balance, and that is liver detoxification and looking at the role the liver is playing. It is so
Yeah.
ignored, especially, and again, this is not to bash anyone who is on HRT, any type of
Yeah.
hormonal replacement, using it as a way to navigate perimenopause and menopause. I always say I am not anti HRT. I am very much pro you making an informed, educated
Yes.
decision about what is right for you. But
Yes.
one of the pitfalls of HRT and menopause specialists and experts who prescribe HRT, no one is talking about what is going on downstream with the liver. So tell
Yes.
us why this liver and this whole detox area is
Mhm.
so critically important when we talk about hormonal health, hormonal balance, and
Yeah.
more importantly, hormonal imbalance.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually I can do a demonstration today.
Yay!
I wasn't planning on this. This is a happy coincidence.
Yeah,
So here's what I like to here's what I like to sort of explain. So first of all, when we talk about estrogen, I think another myth is that we only make one estrogen. Like we talk about it like it's just one hormone.
yes,
Estrogen, progesterone, estrogen, there's one estrogen. We make multiple kinds of estrogen.
yes,
There are three primary estrogens that we
yes,
make. The ones that doctors are looking at is estradiol.
yes,
And that's the only one. And granted, it is the more predominant form of estrogen during our reproductive years, but it's not the only one. And
yes,
in my experience in running hormone testing, I run the Dutch test in my practice. It is almost never the one that's the problem. And this is where it can also be really frustrating when doctors are running labs and saying, oh, everything looks normal. And you're thinking, how? How could that be?
yeah. How could you're
um,
only testing one of the hormones
exactly.
that make up
Exactly.
this estrogen package?
Right, exactly. They're not
Yeah,
seeing the whole picture. So here's what I like to explain. So in the liver, so we have our three main estrogens. What the liver does is it is in simplistic form is it breaks those estrogens down so that they can be eliminated. Estrogen is a beautiful hormone. We want estrogen. I think it gets maligned so often,
yeah,
especially in like estrogen dominant sort of circles. It's
yeah,
causing heavy periods, it's causing pain and all it, I mean, it's not entirely at fault, but it's part of the picture. It is such an important hormone. We have estrogen receptors on every cell in our body,
yeah,
from our head to our vagina to our feet. Like every everywhere. And
Yeah.
if we don't have estrogen, we're going to be brain foggy. We're going to have thyroid issues. We're going to have cardiac
Yeah.
issues. We're going to have problems with our hair,
Inflammation.
skin, and nails, everything,
Yeah.
right? So it's an important hormone. We want it, but then we want to use it and get it out. So our liver is where it starts to break that down and have it be ready for elimination. So imagine this is like one of your major estrogens. We'll call it estradiol just for simplicity's sake. In the liver, it gets broken down. So now we have these two sort of daughter estrogens, if you will, or
Yeah.
estrogen metabolites. And now they're a little bit smaller so they can be sent out of the liver for elimination. So here's where things can go wrong and where things do go wrong in women who have estrogen dominance, who have the heavy, long, painful periods, fibroids, endoadeno. Where I see things go wrong for women in perimenopause is we're making the wrong types of daughter estrogens. And
Mm.
these are proliferative. The wrong types are proliferative, which means they're growth stimulating. So if we think about what that means in the uterus, it's
Yeah.
stimulating a thicker uterine lining. So we have heavier, more painful periods. There's clots. We see fibroid growth happening, these sorts of things. So where this becomes really relevant is we've got to be supporting the liver. Our liver is our major detox organ. I like to say we live in a toxic soup. We can do the best that we can to eat clean, to use clean and green products. But we still have to walk outside every day and be exposed to all of the environmental toxicants that are out there. So our liver is taking quite a beating. And it has, more than 500 jobs that it needs to do. Just one of those is estrogen detoxification and metabolism.
Yeah.
So it needs to have that support to make sure that we're doing that properly.
Yeah.
So women who get put on HRT without really having an understanding, and I use HRT for full disclosure. I use
Yeah.
HRT. I also test. So we need to know when you're taking
Yeah.
this HRT, particularly if you're using an estrogenic HRT, we need to know how you're going to be breaking that down.
Yeah.
Because if it's not being broken down the right pathway and you're now making more of these proliferative estrogens, that can become a real problem because one of them is actually potentially DNA damaging and carcinogenic. So
So that's what I
that's not
wanted.
good.
That's what I wanted. It's fascinating. It's just fascinating. It's a piece of the story that we never talk about. But
Mhm.
um, as you just now said, and I think it's really important that we stress this, if your estrogen is not being broken down appropriately and correctly in the liver, it's going to be broken down to a more toxic form
Yeah.
of estrogen, which then lives in your body. So
Yeah.
then you've got not only estrogen imbalance, but you've got a more toxic form of estrogen in your
Yeah.
body, which we don't want. It's sort
No.
of like, that is that sort of toxic form that really should have left our body, but it's staying there. It's preventing estrogen from doing its real job. And then
Yes.
you've got this whole estrogen imbalance, which doctors are not testing for, doctors are
No.
not talking about. We're not, but they'll happily carry on giving you HRT without
Yeah.
really looking at anything. And the irony of this, and again, this is not about HRT is bad. This is about
Yeah.
understanding what is going on in your body.
Yeah.
The other myth that we don't test hormones during perimenopause because our hormones are fluctuating and we can't get an accurate reading because every day it's going to look different. Whilst there may be some truth in that, if they were actually testing the correct hormones and looking at things in the most appropriate way, you want
Yes.
to know where your hormones are before you start pumping your body with more hormones that
Yeah.
maybe are not being broken down correctly, are maybe not being used correctly, and it's just going to create more imbalance and more symptoms.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, there's a few things in there because I think, like I said, I am not anti-HRT. I think it can be so beneficial so I have experienced personally a
Yeah,
change using HRT. I use both estrogen and progesterone.
yeah,
And it's been truly transformative for me. But what I hear so often from women is, well, I started HRT, I started progesterone,
yeah.
and it didn't make any difference. I still have anxiety and I'm still moody and I still have problematic periods and
And I'm
and
still
this
not
sort of thing. And it's
sleeping.
like I'm still not sleeping, all of this stuff, right? And it's I feel like what's happening with HRT is it's becoming the next quick fix.
Yes.
And what I find to be true, not just for my body, but for the women that I work with who use HRT, is it is only going to be as helpful as the work that you do to support all of the foundational components of your health.
Yes.
If you are undernourishing yourself, because I see this a lot, women who are cutting calories, cutting macros, trying to shrink, trying to be smaller,
Yeah.
or, they're so sensitive to foods and their stomach is upset, so they just really don't eat much. They're undernourishing, so they
Yeah.
don't have the building blocks for their hormones. Just throwing hormones on top of that doesn't fix the fact that they're undernutriented,
Yeah.
right? That's not a
Yeah.
word. You know what I mean?
I know what you're
You
saying.
know?
Yeah.
So I think it's just become like this quick fix.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for HRT. And I also think that we need to be making sure that it's being monitored, its usage is being monitored, just like thyroid.
Yeah.
When women are on thyroid medication, they're monitored to make sure their dosage is appropriate. I
Yeah.
think we should be doing that with HRT as well. And I don't think enough practitioners are doing that.
Yeah.
Um, so I think there's so much hope and so much promise for HRT. It just needs to be done properly.
Yeah.
And it needs to be done with the context of having the knowledge and data about what your body is up to know that this is actually going to be the most beneficial and helpful tool for you,
Yeah.
or to be able to support your body so that it can be metabolized properly and you don't end up with a situation
Yeah.
where now you have too many of the wrong estrogen metabolites or toxic estrogens.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. So when you work with your clients, you said that the four pillars are nutrition,
Yeah, gut
remind
health,
me, gut health,
liver, and then
liver,
the nervous system.
and the
Mm-hmm.
endocrine system, and then your fifth is movement.
Mm-hmm.
So what areas are you finding that most, I know, because for me also, I'm working with five areas to heal, sort of to create hormonal health. And I know it's a puzzle, and for every woman it looks a bit
Yeah,
different. But is
yeah.
there one or two things that you're seeing across the board that every woman needs support in that area?
It's so fascinating, and I'm glad you asked this because something that I have seen to be true over the last probably solid 6 months now with all of the functional tests that I'm running. I've done a
Yeah,
lot of stool testing. Um, is it's gut health actually,
yeah,
women's gut health. And I think too, when I look at again, sort of, I guess our generation, we were the antibiotic generation. Right? The antibiotics for freaking everything, right?
yeah.
I can't I don't know. I was on so many antibiotics when I was young. I wouldn't even be able to give you a number.
Wow.
And it has really damaged our microbiome. And it is so fascinating the research now that is being done on the microbiome, not even just specifically for gut health, but for hormone health, for
Mm-hmm.
metabolic health and function. Every aspect of our health can be traced back to the gut. And
Yes.
our hormones, sex hormones in particular, are hugely influenced by what is happening in the gut. And I think too, with the world that we live in, like I said, we kind of live in a toxic soup. And the things that we consume, a lot of the time, it's not even food anymore. And it's creating this level of inflammation in
Yeah.
our digestive system that is really impairing our ability to synthesize hormones appropriately.
Yeah.
And then hormone communication pathways get shut down too as a result. And so again, we're like blaming our hormones for a problem that actually is originating in the
In the
gut.
guts.
So we're
Yeah.
seeing what I see a lot, and what I'm seeing so much more of is deficiencies in our keystone and probiotic species. I'm seeing overgrowths of pathogenic species. I'm seeing a disintegration of the intestinal barrier. And this is again where it isn't even just about gut health. It's not even just, oh, the bloating, gas, constipation, all of that sort of stuff. No,
Yeah.
it's like a Pepto-Bismol commercial. It isn't, our gut, everything, like I said, can be
Yeah.
traced back to the gut. And this is so important for our hormones. And I think it's an area that is being left behind and forgotten, and
Yeah.
one that if I had to shout from the rooftops, I'd be telling women to work on their gut.
Yeah, I think that's one of the gifts that functional medicine has really given the world and specifically the healthcare system is that conversation around gut health, and the role that the gut plays in every single area of our health in our body. I think functional medicine has done a really good job in
Yeah.
really helping us to understand how profound it is. But very few conventional Western medicine doctors are talking about it. They don't know how to test if you have an
No.
imbalance in your gut. No one is really talking about that unless you go to a functional medicine practitioner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so just to clarify, how are we testing gut health to sort of see what's going on? It's Dutch testing and stool testing. How would
So,
you look
yeah.
at that?
So, stool testing is how I look at the gut. So, I like to use the GI map. So to clarify too, the doctors do have some tests that they can run to look at gut health. The problem with the tests that they offer, though, they are not very sensitive. So, they're
Yeah,
not picking things up.
yeah,
They are not very accurate and they're not very specific. So, we tend to miss a lot
yeah,
with the tests the doctors run, and we're just not, again, really getting that full picture. Sort of like when I was talking about the estrogens, and doctors are
yeah,
really looking at one estrogen. When they're looking at gut testing, they're kind of looking at one microbe when we're
yeah,
like trillions of microbes.
yeah.
So
Or they're looking
I
for a parasite or something like that.
Exactly. So I love the GI map. There's another test that is available now called ViTract, which
Okay.
I've been using as well with some of my clients. And it is really quite fascinating the level of depth that we can get into looking at the various strains of species that are present or not in the gut, and how that can now start to translate and look at all of the various aspects of health that are starting to become problematic, including the gut.
Amazing.
With hormones and estrogen dominance, there's a subsection of the microbiome that recirculates and recycles estrogen if there's an
Wow.
imbalance that's happening. So it's such an incredibly relevant component. And I
Yeah.
think for so many women who can feel like, I've taken the supplements and I'm eating clean and I'm doing the trendy detoxes and all of this sort of stuff. It's okay. But let's do some functional testing because you're
Yeah.
trying, and kudos to you for putting in the work and the effort. What's happening in your body that you don't yet have information on? Because the books, the
Yeah.
blogs, all of the stuff on Google, great for education, great that you are arming yourself with knowledge,
Yeah.
but none of that is telling you what's happening in your
In your
body.
body. Yeah. Yeah.
So testing, I think, is just so critical.
Yeah. And I think what we don't really understand, or definitely what women don't understand, even if you know gut health, gut microbiome, I should be taking my probiotics, I should be eating fermented foods or whatever it is, the long term, like you said, like if you were a child that grew
Yeah.
up on antibiotics, that is going to have an impact on your gut health today. It's not just about
Yeah.
what you were eating today, yesterday, tomorrow. There is
Yeah.
some like long term, deep ingrained
Yeah.
memory in the gut that is going to come up and wreak havoc,
Yep.
not just because, you could be eating sauerkraut for 6 months. That may or may not help you if you've
Yeah.
got some like really deep rooted
Yeah.
gut memory and as you said, there are some exposures that we don't really have a choice about in today's day and
Yeah.
age.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's interesting because the same can be said about birth control too, right? And I'll be fully transparent. I was on birth control for 12 years. When I
yeah,
was 17, I started the pill and I was on for 12 years
yeah,
until I thought, I'm going to want to start a family soon, so I better come off. And then I really got educated and it was like,
yeah,
wow, I shouldn't have been on it for that long. My doctor should not have let me stay on birth control for that long.
no,
It's unbelievable. Um, but I think this is another really interesting piece because I think again, because of the medical system, we've sort of been conditioned to expect that, oh, I have a headache, so I take a pill and it makes me feel better. All done. That's all I need to do.
Yeah.
Our health doesn't work that way. Our health is not like Amazon Prime, where, you order something and then boom, it lands at your door and that's it. You're all done. There's
Yeah.
actually never really an end point where you stop working on your health,
Yeah.
right? Because life is always going to throw curveballs. There's always going to be the next thing that happens. And perimenopause in and of itself is quite a joy, right?
Yes.
Of transitions upon transitions. It never really stops. And I think this is also another bit of a fallacy with the hormone health space is
Yeah.
if I follow this diet for X number of days, then I can just go back and do what I was doing.
Yeah.
What you were doing wasn't working. So why would you expect that you just go back and do what you were doing?
Yeah.
There's got to be this, this consistent sort of chipping away at, what is it that's really important for you in prioritizing with your
Yeah.
health and your hormones, and what do you really ideally want your life to look like in your
Yeah.
day-to-day lived experience?
Yeah. Wow. So I know we could carry on talking and going in all different directions. There's so much here for us to cover. But as we come to the end of our conversation, is there anything that you really feel that women really need to know that they are not being told? Is there any sort of last thing that you really feel that is missing in that health conversation?
Yeah, and I think this comes back to the conversations that are happening or, more realistically are not happening in the doctor's office. And that
Mm,
is that birth control is the only option or the best option, so to speak. Birth control doesn't balance your hormones, it silences them. It
yes,
literally is cutting the communication between your
yes,
brain and your ovary. You are not making your own hormones anymore. Your own hormones that have benefits through your brain, your heart, your thyroid, you're everywhere. So it's starting to really understand and ask sometimes difficult questions of your
yeah,
healthcare providers.
yeah,
What is the long-term effect of being on the pill for an extended period of time? And what other options might there be for me? And what could be said about the role that my gut health is playing here? And where are some of these connecting pieces for me?
yeah,
Because birth control is not it.
yeah.
It is not it.
So, and I know it's a really very controversial or loaded conversation because we have been told that the birth control pill was the savior for women. And so there's a lot of emotions, a lot of
Yeah.
feminist emotions sort
Yeah.
of surrounding the pill. I had another guest on the podcast where we really went deep into that conversation also about
Nice.
the pros and cons and why. And, it's not anti-feminist to say,
Right.
question whether the pill is the oral contraceptive pill is the right path for you. Um, I know that so often the pill is given as the treatment for PCOS,
Yeah.
for any type of irregular periods, for PMS. And as you've correctly said, there may be, and there is, for some women, a time and a place where the oral contraceptive pill is going to be the right form of treatment, but at
Mhm.
least go into it with your eyes open, ask
Yes.
the right questions, and using it for the shortest amount of time you can, and not
Yeah.
as a catch-all women's health treatment option. Um,
Yeah.
because that's what the doctor's just sort of handing out, because that's just really what they give out to um, as the medication of choice for almost every single women's
Yeah.
health reproductive condition.
Yeah.
So thank you for saying that. Really, really important. As you know, as we are not against HRT, we are not anti the pill, just very much pro you being informed and asking
Yeah.
questions to your doctor. And your doctor very often may not give you satisfactory answers, may
Mhm.
say, it's fine, it's been in use for 40 years. Why are you asking questions about it? There are no problems with it.
Just trust me.
Yes, yes, don't we love that? And then, yeah, then we come up with these terms of gaslighting and medical misogyny and all these types of things. And so, yeah, please make sure that you ask questions to your doctors. And if you are not getting the answers, or if you're being disrespected by your doctor, just go find another doctor. There are some really great, amazing, supportive doctors out there. And if you are not with one of them, go find another one. That's also perfectly allowed. It's perfectly
Yes.
allowed to say, I am not happy with this practitioner. I'd like to find another practitioner. I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for looking for alternatives.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay, so as we come to the end of our conversation, this podcast is things that I want my daughters to know about. What do you want your daughters to know? What are the messages that you really are sharing with your daughters,
Yeah.
your nieces, your goddaughters, that next generation? What is really critical for you to share with them?
Yeah. It's a great question because it's a conversation that I'm now starting to have with my older daughter who's 12. And
Yeah,
she's heard me talk about hormones for years. She's heard the conversations, but
yeah,
I haven't been having the conversation with her until very recently. And
yeah,
now really helping her to understand that this is what's going on in your body. This is what to expect next. And it's not something to be feared. Your period is not something to be feared. It's something to celebrate. And I want her to know and feel empowered that there's so much more information that is available to her, whether she gets it from me or she gets it from someone else. And
yeah,
I want her to know it doesn't have to be mom. If you're not comfortable having the conversation with mom, that's okay.
yeah,
We'll find you somebody else. But have information and don't just rely on what the doctor tells you,
yeah,
because that can really create some havoc with your health. And she's had
yeah,
health issues, unfortunately, herself. So empowering her with that knowledge and information and knowing that it's really necessary to understand all of those underlying mechanisms that are going on in the
yeah,
body and not just take the very first pill that's handed to you.
yeah. So important. And I'm really happy that you talked about that. As you were talking, I was thinking about how one of the ways that I learned about our changing bodies and periods and all those types of things. I came of age in the 80s, and it was the book, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. That was passed around all our friends in fifth and sixth grade. And that was sort of like how we started to learn about periods. I mean, I had a very engaged mum, very engaged parents, and they,
Yeah.
gave me the whole conversation. But amongst our friends, the conversation revolved around that book, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And I think the more that you, as the parent, can have those informed conversations with your daughter,
Yes.
and all of us with our daughters, then they can have those conversations with their friends, not based on just reading a book, but based
Yeah.
on real information that is informed and educated, and actually relates to what's going on in their body. So yeah, really, really, really important there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Love it.
Yeah, well, Stephanie, thank you. This has been amazing talking about all the things I love. Tell everyone, where can they reach you? Where can they find you? Where can they follow you if they want to reach out to you and learn more
Yeah.
about what you do?
Yeah, best place to find me is on Instagram. I'm at stephanie.sing.balancedhealth. That's probably the best place to get me and learn more about me and everything that
Amazing.
I do. I respond to DMs there if you want to reach out and talk about anything in more detail that we've talked about today on the podcast. I'd love to connect.
Amazing. Thank you. This has been so great. And I'm sure that a lot of what you've said is going to resonate with women because, as we said, women just think their experiences are normal. And I think
Yes.
hopefully we've begun to let them know through this conversation that normal for them may actually not be normal, and that
Yeah,
there is help available. So
absolutely.
thank you. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Reach out to Stephanie if you have questions. Reach out to me. And I look forward to seeing you at the next episode of the Things I Want My Daughters to Know podcast. Have a great day, everyone.
Take care.